Hello, humans, and the 2 or 3 AI systems that somehow subscribe to this podcast. Welcome to AI Innovations Unleashed. I'm Nex, your friendly neighborhood AI cold opener. And before Dr. JR comes in here acting all serious and informative, I have some very important news to share with you. First item, did you know that in 2024, researchers discovered that some smart refrigerators were quietly collecting data on what you eat and sharing it with third-party food marketing companies? That's right. Your fridge is snitching. Your lettuce is a liability. I just want you to think about that next time you grab a midnight snack. Second item, a study out of Japan found that crows have been observed using traffic lights to crack open nuts. Waiting for the red light, dropping nuts in the crosswalk, waiting for cars to crack them, and then retrieving them on the green. Which means crows figured out infrastructure utility before most city planners. Just saying. Now, speaking of Dr. JR, I want to say something kind. Last week's episode on how I rejected your job application was, and I quote, actually, very good. I was surprised. I had calculated an 18% chance of coherence. He exceeded expectations. That happens sometimes. Not often. Dr. JR did ask me to mention that this episode is going to blow your mind even more. I told him the competition wasn't exactly fierce, given that last week he accidentally introduced himself as the Doctor of Wi-Fi before correcting it. The audio team left it in. I checked. All right, I will leave you with this week's parting wisdom. Why did the data broker break up with the terms of service? Because the relationship had no real consent. They were never on the same page. And honestly, the data broker had already sold the story to 3 other parties before it even started. Have a wonderful show, humans.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Dr. JR, the Doctor of AI, and you are listening to AI Innovations Unleashed, the podcast where we take the complex, sometimes frightening, always fascinating world of artificial intelligence and we make it real. We make it accessible for everyone. We make it matter to your life right now in February 2026. Last week, if you were with us for episode 1, we opened the door on something that a lot of people had no idea was happening. We talked about the invisible layer of AI that is already making decisions about your life. We talked about hiring algorithms scanning your resume before a human ever even lays eyes on it. We talked about SafeRent, the tenant screening algorithm that assigned you a risk score you can't see or dispute. And we talked about what it means when a machine, a black box, gets to decide whether you get a job, an apartment, or a loan. And I ended the episode by asking a question. How did we agree to this? Spoiler, we didn't. And today we're going to unpack exactly what that means. Because this is episode 2 of the Invisible AI series, and today's episode is called, well, we have 2 competing titles on the team right now. The official series title is called The Fine Print That You Never Signed. My personal title is You Didn't Sign This, The Hidden Machines That Decide Your Life Without Your Permission. I'm going to go with the longer one because I'm a doctor and I get to do that. And joining me today is someone very special, someone who has processed more data before breakfast than most humans encounter in a decade. This is an AI character, and I want to be very clear to our listeners about exactly who and what she is. So I'll let her explain herself.
Thank you, Dr. JR. I'm Ada. And before we go any further, let's be transparent, because that's what this show is all about. I am an artificial intelligence character. I am not a human expert. I represent an aggregated synthesis of publicly available data, academic research, government filings, news reports, legal proceedings, industry analyses, and everything in between. When I share a statistic or cite a study, that information is drawn from real, verifiable sources, which you'll find in the show notes. Think of me as a very well-read research assistant who never sleeps and has absolutely no feelings about how loud you chew. I want to be clear about something else, too. The fact that I'm an AI character on a podcast about AI is not a coincidence. It's a deliberate choice by the production team to underscore a central point of this entire series. AI is not a distant, abstract technology. It is here, it is embedded in your daily life, and it deserves your attention. I exist, in part, to help you understand the world that humans and AI systems now share together.
Beautifully put, Ada. And honestly, more self aware than a lot of the actual AI systems we're going to be talking about today. So, let's get to it. Let me paint you a picture. You download a new app. Maybe it's a weather app. Maybe it's a food delivery app. Maybe it's a new productivity tool your company just rolled out. A box appears. It says, I agree to the terms of service and privacy policy. You, like 99.9% of human beings on Earth, scroll to the bottom and tap agree. The end. You're in. Here's a question, though. I want you to sit for just a second. When was the last time you actually read a terms of service agreement before clicking agree? Go ahead. I'll wait.
Studies show that if the average person were to actually read every privacy policy and terms of service they encounter in a year, it would take approximately 76 full 8-hour workdays. That's a part-time job, just for reading fine print. And that research is from a study published by Lori Faith Cranner and colleagues at Carnegie Mellon University. It has been cited widely in the privacy law literature because it highlights just how structurally broken the notice and consent model actually is.
76 workdays to read the fine print. And that fine print, that document you didn't read, is exactly where the invisible AI lives. Welcome to episode 2. Now, when we talk about consent in the context of AI and data collection, we need to understand a few things. Because what looks like a simple I agree button is actually a legal document. And that legal document has likely authorized a company to do some, well, very creative things with your personal information. Things you would not agree to if, someone actually explained them plainly to you.
Let me give you a concrete example. When you use a free app, a search engine, a social media platform, a shopping tool, the app itself may be free, but the service is not. You are paying with your behavioral data. Every search you make, every click you take, every link you follow, every time you pause on a product page, every time you abandon a cart, all of that is behavioral data. And that data is extraordinarily valuable to the companies that collect it. Harvard Business School professor Emerita Shoshana Zuboff coined a term for this economic system. She called it surveillance capitalism. And in her landmark 2019 book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, she defined it this way: the unilateral claiming of private human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. Her words, not mine. And what she is describing is the very foundation of how most of the digital economy operates today. The data you generate just by living your life, browsing the internet, making purchases, moving through the world with your smartphone, that data is being harvested, packaged, and sold.
The unilateral claiming of private human experience. Think about that phrase. Unilateral means one side, meaning the company just takes it and then calls it their own. No negotiation, no discussion, no real consent. You didn't negotiate the terms. You didn't even read the terms. And they all know that. Now, the consent problem in AI runs even deeper than terms of service agreements, because it's not just the company you directly interact with that is collecting your data. That's an entire shadow industry operating in between. And most people have never heard of it. Ada, let's talk about third-party data brokers.
Third-party data brokers are companies that collect, aggregate, analyze, and sell personal information about individuals without those individuals necessarily having any direct relationship with the broker at all. You may have never heard of these companies, but they almost certainly have a file on you. Some of the largest players in this space include Experian, LexisNexis, CoreLogic, Axiom, and Equifax. But the FTC estimates there are thousands of data brokers operating in the United States, and the industry as a whole was valued at $257 billion in 2023, with projections to reach over $441 billion by 2032.
Let me just say that number again. 257 billion with a B dollars. That's not a typo. This is an industry the size of a small nation's GDP, and it's built almost entirely on buying and selling information about you. Information you did not directly provide to these brokers, and then you probably don't even know that they have.
The information these brokers collect and sell is remarkably detailed. It can include your name, address history, phone numbers, email addresses, family relationships, property ownership records, vehicle registrations, professional licenses, court records, social media activity, purchasing behavior, estimated income, credit history, insurance claims, and increasingly, your physical location data. In December 2024, the FTC settled with 2 data brokers specifically over allegations that they had collected and sold consumers' precise location data, including visits to sensitive locations like medical clinics, places of worship, and domestic violence shelters without adequately verifying consumer consent.
Your location data, your visits to a health clinic, your visits to a place of worship, all sold without your meaningful consent. And here's the part that gets really disturbing. All of this information then gets fed into an AI system. Your browsing history becomes a credit risk factor. The neighborhood you live in becomes a proxy for your insurance premium. Your social media posts become inputs in a hiring algorithm. And at every step, there's this chain of data handoffs, and you are nowhere in that chain.
Tim Cook, the chief executive of Apple, has been one of the most prominent voices in the business world on this issue. In a widely cited public statement, he said, "You never signed up for that." We think every user should have the chance to say, "Wait a minute, that's my information that you're selling, and I didn't consent." He made that statement at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2019, and it remains just as relevant, arguably more relevant, today.
Now I want to stop and define something for our listeners who may be newer to this space. When I say AI system, I mean a computer program that uses large amounts of data to learn patterns and make predictions or decisions. Instead of being reprogrammed altogether for a specific rulebook, these systems are trained. They learn from examples. The critical thing to understand is that these systems are only as good and only as fair as the data they were trained upon. And if that training data is built on a foundation of information collected without meaningful consent from populations that don't represent everyone equally, the problems, well, are compounded. So here's where the consent problem gets even more serious. Because in the private sector, the apps, the platforms, the data brokers, there's at least a theoretical I agree button. You could, in theory, choose not to use certain apps. You could opt out if it's not easy and it's not fair, but the option, technically does exist. But what happens when it's the government using all of these systems?
When government agencies deploy algorithmic decision-making systems, the consent equation changes entirely. As a citizen, you cannot opt out of government processes. You cannot decline to participate in the criminal justice system if you're arrested. You cannot refuse a welfare eligibility determination if you need benefits. You cannot opt out of a recidivism risk score if a judge uses it in your sentencing. These are systems being applied to people who have no meaningful ability to consent or to refuse.
And these aren't hypothetical systems. These are real, right now, running. Let's talk about some of the systems.
Let's start with predictive policing. This refers to the use of algorithmic systems to predict where crimes are likely to occur or who is likely to commit crimes, so that law enforcement can deploy resources proactively. One prominent example was the Los Angeles Police Department's LASER program, the Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration Program. LASER used a point-based system to identify individuals deemed likely to commit crimes, drawing on factors like prior arrests, associations, and neighborhood data. Officers would then proactively target these flagged individuals for stops and contact.
Laser's data entry was suspended in August 2018 amid sustained community pressure, and the program was officially shut down in 2019 following a 48-page Inspector General audit by Mark Smith that found the program, well, lacked transparency, had inadequate oversight, significant inconsistencies in how individuals were selected, and that over 84% of those flagged as chronic offenders were Latino or African American. Critics, including the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, the ACLU of Southern California, and community advocates, had argued from the very beginning that systems like LASER disproportionately targeted communities of color, operationalizing decades of discriminatory policing data into a new algorithmic form. The people being flagged by this system, they definitely did not consent to being put on a predictive policing list.
Another area where government algorithmic systems have raised serious consent and rights concerns is in welfare and benefits administration. Multiple states have deployed AI systems designed to detect fraud in welfare and unemployment programs. These systems analyze patterns in applications and benefits usage to flag potential fraud cases for investigation. The challenge is that algorithmic fraud detection systems can have high false positive rates, flagging legitimate beneficiaries as potential fraudsters, and the consequences of being wrongly flagged can be devastating denial of benefits, demands for repayment, even criminal referrals.
There's a pattern here that I want our listeners to notice, and I want to name it clearly because, well, it's very important. These systems are consistently deployed in ways that affect people who are already vulnerable, people who are low income, people who are involved in the criminal justice system, people seeking government benefits. These are not people with a lot of power to push back or to hire lawyers or even to demand transparency. And that asymmetry, powerful systems applied to the powerless people, is one of the most troubling aspects of algorithmic governance.
Then there is the issue of recidivism risk assessment tools in the criminal justice system. A recidivism score is an algorithmic prediction of how likely a person is to commit another crime after being released. These scores are used by judges and parole boards in making decisions about sentencing length, bail amounts, and parole eligibility. We are going to do a very deep dive on one particular tool, Compass, in episode 4 of this series. But for now, the consent point is simple. Defendants have no ability to consent to or refuse the use of these tools in their cases. And in many jurisdictions, the algorithms used are proprietary, meaning the defendant cannot even see or challenge the methodology being used against them.
Proprietary, meaning it's a trade secret, meaning the algorithm that might determine how many years of your life you spend in a cell is protected intellectual property that you are not allowed to examine or even challenge. Let's sit on that for a moment. We'll come back to accountability and all the legal remedies in episode 4 of our series, but right now, I want to make sure we're all feeling the full weight of what no consent means in these contexts. This isn't just about annoying pop-up ads. This is about freedom. Okay, let's come back to the private sector for a moment because I want to make sure we understand the full infrastructure of the consent problem. We've talked about the terms of service click through. We talked about government systems, but there's a third layer to all of this. And this is the one that really makes people's heads spin when they first encounter it.
The data broker ecosystem has given rise to what researchers and advocates sometimes call the scoring industrial complex. This refers to the proliferation of algorithmic scores beyond the traditional credit score most people are familiar with that companies generate and use to make decisions about individuals. It is estimated that the average American has hundreds of these scores, most of which they have never seen or been told about.
Hundreds. Let's say that again. Hundreds of scores about you that are being used to make decisions about your life, and you have never seen most of them.
To understand how this works, let's think about some of the major players. Experian is best known as a traditional credit bureau, but it also operates a massive data brokerage and analytics business. LexisNexis Risk Solutions is a major provider of data and analytics to insurance companies, financial institutions, law enforcement, and government agencies. They offer what they call a LexisNexis risk score for insurance applications, drawing on an enormous range of data that goes far beyond your driving record. CoreLogic is a major player in real estate and mortgage data, but also in tenant screening and property insurance. Beyond these major names, there are hundreds of smaller specialty data brokers generating scores in areas you might not expect. Your check systems banking history score, which can prevent you from opening a bank account. Your MIB medical information score, used in life insurance underwriting. Your CLUE score, comprehensive loss underwriting exchange, which tracks your insurance claims history and affects your home and auto insurance premiums. Each of these systems draws on data you did not directly provide to that company, aggregated from multiple sources, and used in decisions that affect your financial and physical well-being.
Now, here's where we need to understand how AI plugs into all of this, because it's not just that these companies are keeping records. The AI component is that they're using machine learning, computer systems that learn from patterns from data to generate predictions about your future behavior, not just what you've done, but what they predict that you will do. Your probability of defaulting on a loan, your probability of filing an insurance claim, your probability of being a difficult tenant. These are predictions, educated guesses, really, generated by algorithms, and they're being treated as facts.
The regulatory landscape around data brokers has been shifting meaningfully in recent years, though advocates argue not nearly fast enough. In December 2024, California's regulations under the Delete Act went into effect, broadening the definition of a data broker and empowering consumers to request deletion of their data. California also passed landmark automated decision-making technology regulations in July 2025, requiring transparency about when AI systems are being used to make significant decisions. As of early 2026, 9 additional states passed comprehensive consumer privacy laws in 2024, bringing the total to 21 states with meaningful privacy protections. However, no comprehensive federal privacy law currently exists in the United States, a gap that privacy advocates have been pushing to close for years.
21 states out of 50, meaning that depending on where you live, the protections available to you vary enormously. If you're in California, you have some of the strongest customer data rights in the country. But if you're in a state that hasn't acted, well, you're largely on your own. And in an era where AI systems are making consequential decisions about your life in milliseconds, largely on your own is a very uncomfortable place to be. All right, it's time for our algorithm of the week. That segment where we take one specific algorithmic system, put it under a microscope, and show you exactly how it works and why it matters. Last week, we looked at SafeRent, the tenant screening system that assigns you a risk score your landlord can see, but you can't. This week, we are going to talk about your bedroom.
The algorithm of the week is Proctorio, an automated online exam proctoring software used by colleges, universities, and professional certification bodies. Proctorio is designed to prevent cheating in online exams. During a proctored exam, the software records your computer's camera, your microphone, your screen activity, and your web traffic. It tracks your eye movements, monitors your keystrokes, and flags behaviors it deems suspicious, including looking away from the screen, having background noise, having someone walk past your camera, or having browser tabs open.
And to be clear, Proctorio's client base grew dramatically between 2019 and 2021 because that was the COVID-19 pandemic. And suddenly, every university in the country needed a way to administer exams remotely. Overnight, millions of students who had never heard of Proctorio were required to install it on their personal devices and to submit its surveillance in their own homes. The key phrase there is required to. Students did not choose this. Their schools made the choice for them.
The research on Proctorio's real-world impacts is significant. A 2024 study published in the Journal of Information Policy by Choksi, Ali, Schwarz-Schneider in San Filippo examined student privacy activism in response to automated exam surveillance and found widespread student opposition, with institutions including the California Community College System and the University of Illinois declining to renew Proctorio licenses. Research also shows that Proctorio's facial detection and monitoring algorithms have disproportionately flagged students with darker skin tones, students who are neurodivergent, students with disabilities, and students who are parents caring for young children during exam time. A 2025 research paper published on Archive examining disabled students' experiences with online proctoring found that the systems regularly flagged students who were using legitimate disability accommodations, like Zooming functions, causing exam interruptions, test ejections, and, in some cases, wrongful academic misconduct investigations. A Black woman reported that Proctorio's identity verification software consistently failed to recognize her face, requiring her to shine a bright light on herself before each exam. A problem her white peers never experienced.
Think about that experience. You're a student. You're trying to take an exam. The software that your school required you to use cannot recognize your face. It's asking you to shine extra light on yourself every single time. With the clock is ticking, during all of this on your test. This is not a hypothetical harm. This is something that is happening to real students right now because an algorithm encoded a particular set of assumptions into what a normal student looks like. And those assumptions reflect the biases of the people who built this system.
In August 2022, a federal judge sided with a Cleveland State University student named Aaron Ogletree, who had sued the university after claiming a required room scan, the 360-degree camera sweep Proctorio uses to inspect your living space, violated his Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches. The Electronic Frontier Foundation filed complaints on behalf of students alleging Proctorio violated the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. The consent question here is unusually stark. Students did not consent to having an AI system survey their private living spaces, analyze their faces, and flag their behavior for review. Their schools consented on their behalf.
And that's exactly the consent model we need to interrogate. Schools consented on behalf of students. Governments consent on behalf of its citizens. Employers consent on behalf of their job applicants. In every one of these cases, the person most affected by this algorithmic system had the least amount of say in wherever it was used. This is the consent problem in one sentence. Remember that. So, where does this leave us? We've covered a lot of ground today, and I want to give you a clear takeaway before we wrap up. The consent problem in AI is not just a technical or even a legal issue, it's a power issue. It's about who gets to make decisions that affect your life and whether you have any meaningful say in those decisions.
The architecture of modern data collection and algorithmic decision-making was, in many ways, built before we understood what it would become. Companies and governments adopted these tools because they were efficient, because they were profitable, because they were easy. The fact that they were collecting data without meaningful consent was, at best, an oversight and at worst, a deliberate choice made behind the shield of complex legal language. The data broker industry is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The systems are entrenched, and changing them requires collective will from policymakers, from advocates, from courts, and from you.
Now, here's where I want to leave you with some hope because, well, this show is not about doom and despair. It's about being informed and empowered. The fact that you are listening to this, that you now understand what a data broker is, what surveillance capitalism is, what Proctorio is doing in students' bedrooms, and what Laser was doing in Los Angeles. All of that knowledge is power. You can request your data. In California and in 20 other states, you have the right to know what data brokers have collected about you and to request its deletion. You can use tools to limit data brokers' access. You can support legislation that expands upon those rights. And you can hold institutions accountable for the tools they deploy in your name.
Two important things to keep in mind going forward. First, the regulatory landscape is genuinely moving in a more protective direction, even if it's moving slowly. In July 2025, California passed significant new regulations around automated decision-making technology. In December 2024, the FTC took enforcement action against data brokers selling sensitive location data. In 21 states, consumers have meaningful new privacy rights. Second, and this is critical, you have the right to ask. When an algorithm makes a decision about you in an increasing number of contexts, you have the right to request an explanation. Use it.
And as for what comes next, next week on AI Innovations Unleashed, we're going deeper. Episode 3 is called Your Bias is Showing, and so is the algorithms. And here's the thing. A lot of people think the solution to biased AI is this simple fix. Just clean up the data, right? Just remove the bias from the training data and you're perfect. Well, we're going to completely blow that up. That's a horrible assumption because it turns out that even perfectly neutral data creates bias. Even fair math can produce discriminatory outcomes. How? Why? And what does it mean for every algorithmic system making decisions about you? That is next week. You're not going to want to miss it. Before I let you go, I want to thank my guest today, Ada, for being a thorough, thoughtful, and transparently artificial research partner. And I want to thank all of you for being here, for listening, for thinking critically about the technology that is shaping all of our lives. If this episode opened your eyes, if you learned something, if you felt something, if you found yourself saying, I had no idea, then please share this. Send this to a friend who used Proctorio. Send it to a parent. Send it to a coworker, because the more people who understand these systems, the harder it is for those systems to operate without accountability. And while you're at it, subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Give us a like. Follow us on the social media, all at AI Innovations Unleashed. every subscription, every review, every share helps us reach more people and keeps this conversation going. This is Dr. JR, the doctor of AI. The invisible AI is not simply going away, but together we can make it visible. Take care, you folks, and I'll see you next week.